Giovanna Proença, and today we're going to talk about problem set 2 Vanity plates of CS50 Introduction to Programming with Python. If you want to ask anything about programming, check the description below. You can schedule a free meeting with us, alright? And we would like to emphasize that this video solution is made for those who have already completed the assignment and want to have another view about the problem, alright? We do not support plagiarism. So let's see this problem in here. These Vanity plates, we're going to create a code, alright, where we have to check if the license plate is valid or not. And we have some things that we have to check if it's valid or not, alright? These 4 bullet points in here. We kind of have here this main code, alright? We're going to use this source code here in our code, alright? And I'm going to explain a little bit how it works, okay? And this is what is going to happen. The user is going to type in the plate that he wants, and we're going to say valid or invalid. Alright, so let's understand here the main code. So before we understand, let's see how the main function works before we understand everything we have in here, alright? In some Python scripts, you may see a function definition and a conditional statement that looks like the example below. In this code, there is a function called main that prints the phrase hello world when the Python interpreter executes it. There is also a conditioner or if statement that checks the value of name and compare it to the string main. When the if statement evaluates to true, the Python interpreter executes main. So now that we understood how the main function works, let's see what we have in here. So basically, we have our main function, so this is what we're going to run in the beginning, alright? And we have here a variable called plate, and this variable is going to hold the value of whatever the user type in, alright? Because here we have an input, so the input function is going to ask the user for something, and we're going to store in this variable plate, alright? Then we have an if and else condition. We're going to understand better how if and else condition work in the future, alright? And this if and else condition is saying what? We're going to say if is valid is this function here, alright, that we have in our line 9, and we're going to implement. So if this function is valid, return us true, we're going to print valid, and else we're going to print invalid, alright? So let's start implementing our isValid function, checking all the 4 bullet points we have in our requirement here, alright? I already passed these bullet points in here as comment, okay? So I'm just gonna look at our code here, okay? So Vanity plates may contain a maximum of 6 characters, letters or numbers, and a minimum of 2 characters. So in here we can check the length of our string. If the length of our string is greater than 6, we're going to say that it's invalid, or if the length of our string is less than 2, it's invalid as well, alright? So before we do this, let's understand how we can check things using if and else conditions. Python if and else statements help coders control the flow of their programs. An if and else Python statement evaluates whether an expression is true or false. If a condition is true, the if statement executes. Otherwise, the else statement executes. Let's suppose we want to check if a number is greater than 10. The number we want to check is stored in the variable x. We can check if this number is greater than 10 by doing if x operator greater and the number 10. If this condition is true, we're going to print numbers greater than 10 only. Otherwise, if the condition is false, we're going to have our else statement. In the else, we're going to print any condition satisfied. Let's see one example in the code above. Let's suppose that x stores the value 7. The if condition won't be true because 7 is not greater than 10. Then we will skip the if block and go to the else, printing any condition satisfied. Let's do another example, making the variable x holding the value 15. In this case, the if condition will be true because 15 is greater than 10, and we will print numbers greater than 10 only. After that, we won't see the else condition because we already found our right condition. A Python elif statement checks for another condition if all preceding conditions are not met. They appear after a Python if statement and before an else statement. You can use as many elif statements as you want. Now that we've learned elif, let's improve the previous code with an elif statement. Let's add one more condition where we want to check if the number is less than 0. In this case, we would write elif x, the operator less, and the number 0. If this condition is true, we will print negative numbers only. Let's see one example in the code above. Let's suppose that x stores the value -5. The if condition won't be true because -5 is not greater than 10. Then we will skip the if block and go to the elif block. Now we're going to check if this elif condition is true. Since -5 is less than 0, we will print negative numbers only. After that, we won't see the else condition because we already found our right condition. Let's do another example, making the variable x hold the value 5. In this case, the if condition won't be true because 5 is not greater than 10. Then we will skip the if block and go to the elif condition. Again, this elif condition won't be true because 5 is not less than 0. Then we will skip the elif block and go to the else condition. In this else, we're going to print any condition satisfied. So now that we understood how if and else condition works, let's start implementing, okay? So I'm gonna say if length of our string s is less than 2 or length of our string s is greater than 6, this means that we're gonna return false because this will be an invalid plate. All right, we have this function is valid, is going to return true or false, and this will be printed. This true or false will be handled here in the if and else condition in the beginning of our code, okay? So this is the first part. Now we need to check if all Vanity plates must start with at least 2 letters. So we need to check if the first 2 characters of our plate are 2 letters, all right? So how are we gonna do this? Let's see how the isAlpha function work. I have here opened the W3 Schools, all right? It's a really good resource if you have any questions about some methods in some languages like Python, all right? So let's see how this isAlpha works. The isAlpha method returns true if all the characters are alphabet letters. Example of characters that are not alphabet letters: space and question mark, those things, all right? So let's see this example. Let's suppose we have a variable x that holds the value apple. If we want to check if x is made of alphabet letters, we do print x.isAlpha and it will return true. If we change the value of x to 1, 2, 3 and we do the same print, we will receive false. So now that we understood that isAlpha, this is what exactly we're going to implement in here, all right? So we're gonna check if the first and the second characters are letters. So how can we get the elements in our string? We can use indexes, all right? We can say that the element in our string s on position 0 is alpha, all right? And so if this is alpha, return us false, okay? And s on position 1, so the second character in our string is alpha, return false, or here actually is an or, because both cases need to be false, okay? We're gonna return false. So if the first letter is not an alpha and or the second letter is not an alpha, we're going to return false because this is invalid, okay? This is what we're going to do in here. Now let's do the next one. Now in this case, we need to check that numbers cannot be used in the middle of a plate. They must come at the end. For example, AAA222 would be an acceptable Vanity plate, and AAA22A would not be acceptable. The first number used cannot be a 0, all right? So here we're going to do a while loop to check if we start our number with a 0, okay? So let's see how while loop works before we start. We are setting the variable I equals to 1, then we are creating a while loop. Remember that the while loop, we can execute a set of statements as long as the condition is true. In our case, we're going to stay in our while loop until the value I is less than 4. So in the first iteration, I will be 1. Since 1 is less than 4, we're going to keep in our loop. Then we will print the value of I, that is 1, and increment the value I by 1. Next iteration, I will have value 2. Since 2 is less than 4, we're going to keep in our loop. Then we will print the value of I, that is 2, and increment the value of I by 1. Next iteration, I has value 3. Since 3 is less than 4, we're going to keep in our loop. Then we will print the value of I, that is 3, and increment the value of I by 1. Then we're going to check if the value of I is less than 4. Since the value of I is 4, our condition is not true anymore. So we don't continue in our while loop and we're done with our code. So what are we going to do in here? We're going to loop through our string, alright, using a while loop. And once we reach the first letter, we're going to check if this once we reach the first number, we're gonna check if this number is 0 or not. If it is 0, we're going to stop our while loop, alright, and we're going to return false